The air was thick with the scent of lavender and dust, as Amelia stepped into the bookstore on 47th Street, her fingers brushing the edge of the door frame like she was touching something sacred. The chime above the door rang out, soft and hesitant, almost embarrassed by its own existence. She had passed this place a dozen times, always telling herself she'd walk in tomorrow. But today was different. Today, she needed quiet, and something about this store, its age, its cluttered chaos whispered. The promise of refuge. She wasn't running from anything, not really. At least, that's what she told herself. In reality, the silence of her apartment had become unbearable, like a vacuum pulling every thought toward the man she had met 6 weeks ago and left her 2 nights prior with a single text, "I'm sorry, but I can't." There were no explanations, no answers. Just that one line. She hadn't cried. Not yet. But the ache sat low and heavy inside her, like a stone wedged between her lungs. The bookstore smelled like forgotten stories and coffee from a pot that hadn't been cleaned in days. Shelves leaned like tired old men, buckling under the weight of the years. Amelia walked past rows of books with no system she could discern, and that chaos brought a strange comfort. Here, nothing made sense, sand that made her feel less alone. She turned a corner, and there he was. Not the man who left her, but someone else. Someone new. He was perched on a ladder, one foot on the top rung, like he didn't know or didn't care that people weren't supposed to do that. A weathered copy of Anna Karenina was tucked under one arm as he reached for another book on the top shelf. He looked like a painting of a person, too precise, too perfect, like he might fade if you looked at him too long. Hair the color of dark espresso, a shirt too wrinkled to be worn ironically, eyes that scanned each page like they were looking for a secret. He noticed her watching and smiled. Not the arrogant kind of smile she had come to associate with beautiful men, but something more human, curious, cautious. "You're in my spot," he said. Amelia blinked. "Excuse me." He tapped the ladder. "This spot, it's usually mine. Around this time, Tuesdays and Fridays, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. She tilted her head. "You have a schedule for standing on ladders in public bookstores. Better than therapy," he said. "Less expensive, too." Amelia laughed. It was the first real sound she had made all day that didn't feel like it was forced from her throat. He climbed down, landing beside her with the casual grace of someone who didn't care if he fell. He held out a hand. "Julian." She hesitated before taking it. "Amelia." "Nice to meet you, Amelia." "Do you always interrupt strange men during their weekly rituals?" "Only the ones who climb ladders like they're auditioning for a circus act." Julian grinned. "Then I guess I'm flattered." They talked for 20 minutes. Then 40. The bookstore was closing when the owner, a gray-bearded man who looked like he'd been asleep behind the counter the entire time, cleared his throat and flicked the lights. Outside, the streetlights bathed the sidewalk in amber. Julian walked with her to the corner, and before they parted, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a receipt. He scribbled something on the back and handed it to her. "Call me if you ever feel like sharing a ladder." She didn't call. Not right away. It took 5 days. 5 days of wondering why she couldn't stop thinking about the boy in the bookstore. 5 days of telling herself she didn't need another man in her life, especially not now. 5 days of staring at that receipt on her nightstand like it was a detonator, her finger hovering over the button. When she finally did call, he answered on the first ring. "Ladder girl," he said, and just like that, she laughed again. They met for coffee the next day, then dinner the next week, then a museum, where they got kicked out for arguing too loudly about whether modern art was genius or madness. She said madness, he said genius. They were both a little right, he told her. He was a writer. She told him she was a graphic designer. They compared favorite books, traded childhood embarrassments, and played that game where you try to guess a stranger's entire life story based on what they're wearing. Amelia started to feel alive again, but there was something strange about Julian, a kind of sadness behind his smile, something unfinished, like a story he hadn't told yet. She didn't ask. She didn't want to ruin the magic. Not yet. The first time he kissed her, it was raining. Not dramatic, movie rain, but a soft drizzle that blurred the world into something more beautiful. They were walking along the river, arguing about weather. The Great Gatsby was overrated, she thought it was. When he stopped and looked at her like he was seeing something rare. "You're going to break my heart," he said. She frowned. "That's a strange thing to say." Julian smiled sadly. "I just have a feeling." Then he kissed her. It was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for permission. It simply existed, like gravity, or fate. And as her arms wrapped around his neck, and her heart tried to convince her that this was the start of something real, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The days blurred into each other after that first kiss. There was something about Julian that made time bend, like it forgot how to move forward correctly when he was around. Amelia found herself drifting through mornings just to get to the afternoons when they'd meet. Her world, once meticulously scheduled and carefully protected, became soft around the edges. She used to scoff at people who fell in love too fast. Now she was becoming one. Julian had a way of listening that made her feel like every word she spoke mattered. He'd tilt his head slightly, eyes locked on hers, and asked the kinds of questions no one else did, questions that slipped past the surface, like pebbles sinking into deep water. "What's the one dream you've never told anyone because you were afraid they'd laugh?" They were lying on his living room floor when he asked her that. It was their third weekend together. There were half-empty glasses of wine on the windowsill and an old Nina Simone record spinning in the corner. He had a terrible record player, one of those retro-looking ones that sounded like a dying gramophone, but she didn't mind. The scratches in the music felt oddly fitting. Amelia stared at the ceiling. "I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid." Julian turned his head toward her, grinning. "Really? Yeah. I even wrote to NASA. I was 7. I told them I was ready to go to the moon whenever they needed me." "What did they say?" "They sent me a sticker and a pamphlet." Julian chuckled. "And that wasn't enough to launch your career?" "Apparently not." He reached for her hand. "I think you'd look good in a spacesuit." Amelia squeezed his fingers. "I'd miss bookstores. I'd build one on the moon." She laughed with ladders. "Of course." They were like that for weeks, effortlessly close. Julian had a way of being in the world that felt light, almost boyish. He'd wake her at 2 a.m. just to walk to the diner down the block for pancakes. He'd leave notes in her sketchbooks, tiny folded squares that said things like, "You're more vivid than anything I've ever written." But then things started shifting. That the first time she noticed it was on a Thursday. Julian didn't answer his phone, not for hours. Amelia wasn't the possessive type. She hated that trope, but something about the silence felt off. She texted once. Then again, the first read, "Hey, still on for dinner?" The second, "Everything okay?" No reply, no dots, nothing. Then, just after midnight, her phone buzzed. "Sorry, fell asleep. Long day tomorrow." She wanted to believe it, she did. But her gut was whispering something else. Not a shout, just a murmur. The next day he was back to normal. Charming, attentive. He brought her tulips. She let it go. But it happened again. And again he would disappear, not for long. Never more than a day, but the pattern formed quickly. And it was always the same, a vague excuse. A return to form. A gift or a gesture. It felt rehearsed. Still she wanted to trust him. Wanted to believe that everyone had bad days. That sometimes people just needed space. Julian was a writer, after all. Maybe he was just moody. Maybe he was chasing inspiration into dark places. But the lies came, slow and slippery, like water leaking through a crack. One evening, she noticed something strange. They were sitting at his kitchen table, eating Chinese takeout. Julian had gone to the bathroom, and Amelia, reaching for a napkin, knocked over his phone. It landed face up. Message flashed across the screen. "Anna, I miss you. Can we talk?" The words burned into her brain. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The room was suddenly too small. Julian came back seconds later. She didn't say anything, just smiled, like her heart wasn't spiraling into pieces. She tucked the name away like a sharp blade in her pocket. She wasn't ready to use it yet. That night he kissed her forehead and said, "You make me feel like I could be good." And maybe that was the problem. She didn't sleep. The name kept echoing. Anna. Who was Anna? An ex, a friend, someone more. The next morning she couldn't hold it in. "Julian," she said, over coffee, "who's Anna?" His smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. He set his cup down carefully. Too carefully. She said, someone from my past. He said, that's not an answer. He sighed. It's complicated. That's not an answer either. Julian stood up and walked to the window. The silence stretched between them, thin and taut. I was engaged once, he said finally. Amelia blinked. What? To Anna. 2 years ago. The room swayed. You never told me. I didn't know how. Did you end it? His pause was too long. She left, he said. It was mutual. We weren't good together. But she's texting you. She's confused. She regrets things, but I've moved on. Amelia stared at him. Have you? Julian didn't reply. That was the first real crack. The one that couldn't be papered over with flowers or kisses or whispered promises. She left his apartment that day with her heart unraveling like thread pulled from a hem. She wanted to believe him, but something inside her, a part of her that hadn't gone completely numb, knew this was just the beginning of the unraveling. She didn't see Julian for 3 days after that, and on the 4th, when she finally did, he wasn't alone. Amelia didn't follow him. Not at first. She hadn't planned on being near his building that morning. She told herself she was going to the cafe across the street, just for coffee. Maybe a pastry. She told herself it had nothing to do with Julian, nothing to do with the texts he hadn't returned, or the ache in her chest that felt a lot like betrayal. But when she saw him, everything inside her stilled. He stepped out of the building in his usual slow, distracted way, his scarf slung carelessly around his neck. She could see from a distance that his hair was damp, shower fresh, and that he was fiddling with his phone the way he did when he didn't want to be seen. But he wasn't alone. The woman walked beside him, wrapped in a red wool coat too elegant for the season. She was tall, her dark hair pulled back in a knot that spoke of quiet precision. They weren't holding hands, but they walked close. Too close. Something about the way they moved together without touching, without speaking, told Amelia everything she needed to know. This wasn't a chance meeting. It was muscle memory. They crossed the street and Julian glanced over his shoulder. For a second, Amelia thought he'd seen her. But his eyes swept past without recognition. She stepped behind a delivery truck and waited for her heart to catch up with her body. The woman in the red coat was Anna. She knew it. Didn't need confirmation. Her gut was screaming. Julian didn't call that night, or the next. When he finally texted, it was a single line. Can we talk? 3 words, typed like an afterthought, loaded like a confession. She didn't respond right away. She let the message sit there on her screen, daring her to open a door she wasn't sure she could close again. It was 2:17 a.m. when she finally replied, I saw you. She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling. No emojis, no punctuation, just the truth, plain and unforgiving. He didn't reply until morning. Come over, please. The apartment was darker than usual when she arrived. The curtains were drawn. The air inside was heavy with the scent of coffee and something else, something like regret. Julian was on the couch, wearing the same clothes she'd seen him in. 2 days ago he didn't get up. Amelia stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You should start talking. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. She came back, he said. 3 weeks ago. Her stomach clenched. 3 weeks. He nodded. She showed up out of nowhere. Said she was in town for a conference. Said she'd been thinking about things. And you didn't think to tell me. I didn't know what to say. How about, hey, the woman I used to be engaged to is back in my life and wants to talk. Julian ran a hand through his hair. It wasn't like that, then. What was it like, Julian? He didn't answer. That's what I thought. Amelia turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. She had a miscarriage. She froze. He continued, softer now. When we were together, a year before we ended it, I never told anyone, not even my parents. Amelia slowly turned back around. She was 8 weeks, Julian said, his voice cracking. It wasn't planned. We weren't ready. And when it happened, it broke something in both of us. There was silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that screamed inside your bones. I blamed her, he said unfairly. I didn't mean to, but I did. And she blamed me, so we stopped talking. Then we stopped touching. Then we stopped trying. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. When she came back, it brought everything with her. The guilt, the what ifs. I didn't invite her in to rekindle anything. I needed to understand. I needed closure. And now? Amelia asked, her voice small. I don't know. It was the worst thing he could have said. Not I love you. Not I choose you. Just I don't know. Julian stood, took a step closer. You asked if I've moved on from her. I thought I had. But when she walked through that door again, he didn't finish the sentence. Tears stung Amelia's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. I don't want to be someone's maybe, she said. You're not, but I'm not your yes either. They stood there in the dim light, a storm of things unsaid swirling between them. I'm sorry, Julian whispered. Amelia stepped back. So am I. Then she walked out the door, not because she didn't love him, but because she did. She cried in the stairwell. The kind of cry that doesn't make a sound but shatters everything inside. And when she finally got home, there was a message waiting on her phone. Not from Julian, from Anna. Amelia stared at the screen like it might disappear. If she blinked too hard, we need to talk. Sent 10:42 p.m. from Anna. There were 1,000 reasons not to answer. It felt like stepping into a fire to understand the burn. But curiosity, the terrible, destructive kind, dug its hooks in deep. She typed and deleted 6 responses before landing on the most neutral, least pathetic version she could manage. About Julian. The reply came seconds later. Yes, can we meet? Amelia's instinct screamed no. But her pride was silent. Pride didn't know how to help when your heart had been cracked by someone who claimed they didn't mean to. She agreed to meet the next day. A cafe on the west side. Public neutral. Too open for yelling. Too crowded for breakdowns. Anna was already there when she arrived. She looked untouchable. The kind of woman who wore discomfort like perfume, expensive, rare, and with a note of quiet dominance. Her red coat was draped over the back of her chair like a flag. Amelia approached slowly, pulse pounding in her throat. She half expected Anna to stand, to offer a handshake, maybe even a fake smile. She did none of those things. Thanks for coming, Anna said, her voice calm, measured. Amelia sat. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. A waiter came by. Amelia ordered a tea she wouldn't drink. Anna folded her hands. I won't keep you long, I just need you to know a few things. Amelia tensed. Does Julian know you're meeting me? No, Anna said. And that's not a secret I plan to keep. You can tell him if you want. I'm not here to manipulate anyone. Just clarify. Amelia didn't respond. Anna sighed. Julian and I were toxic. We tried to pretend we weren't. But that's the truth. We were drawn to each other for the wrong reasons. Need, mostly. Not love, not really. Why? Did you come back? Anna looked out the window. Because I thought I had something to fix. Because I thought maybe if I apologized, the weight of it all would lift. You wanted him back. I thought I did. But seeing him again, she paused. He's different now. And then I found out about you. Amelia blinked. How? Anna met her eyes. He talks about you, more than he realizes. You come up in his stories, even when he doesn't say your name. A silence hung between them like glass. I don't want him back, Anna said, finally. But I do want him to be honest with you, with himself. He hasn't been. Amelia's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? There's more to why I left, Anna said. More than the miscarriage. More than the fighting. Amelia waited. He cheated, Anna said. Everything in the cafe dulled. The clinking of spoons, the hiss of the espresso machine, the conversations around them all muffled. You're lying, Amelia said, but her voice lacked conviction. I wish I were, Anna replied. It wasn't some long affair, just one night. But it mattered. Amelia's chest tightened. He didn't tell me that. No, Anna said. He wouldn't. The waiter returned with her tea. It sat untouched. Amelia tried to speak, but her thoughts were too loud. Images, fragments, Julian laughing, Julian touching her cheek, Julian whispering promises in the dark, collided with this new truth like shards in a hurricane. I didn't come to ruin anything, Anna said. I know what it's like to fall in love with the version of Julian that he wants to be. but loving him means seeing the version he hides too. Amelia stood. Anna didn't try to stop her. I'm sorry, she said, simply. Outside, the city felt colder. Sharper. She walked aimlessly for over an hour, hands buried in her coat pockets, replaying every moment she'd ever believed Julian loved her. It all felt rewritten now. Tilted, shadowed. She didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, she went to the bookstore on 47th, the place it all began. The lights were still on. The door still chimed the same broken little melody. She wandered to the back, to the ladder, their ladder, and he was there. Julian looked up from the shelf like she'd been conjured by memory. His smile started, faltered. Amelia, he said. She didn't smile. Anna told me, she said. His face went blank. What? She told me the truth, about why she really left. He froze, eyes locked on hers. New denial. New outrage. Just stillness. Is it true? She asked, her voice trembling. Did you cheat on her? A long pause. Then, softly, yes. She felt it like a punch. Not the word. The way he said it. Quiet, defeated, like something he'd been carrying for too long. It was one night, he said. I was drunk, angry. We'd just had the worst fight we'd ever had. I thought we were over. I thought she'd never come back. So you made sure she wouldn't? Julian flinched. I'm not proud of it. That's not enough, Amelia whispered. I deserved to know. I know. She swallowed hard. Would you have told me? He didn't answer. I can't love someone who only gives me pieces, she said. I need the whole truth, Julian, even the ugly parts. Tears welled in his eyes. I wanted to be better with you. You should have been better before me. For a long moment they just stood there. Two people in a bookstore, caught in the wreckage of could-have-bins. She turned to leave. He didn't stop her. The days after the bookstore, confrontation moved slowly, too slowly for someone trying to forget. Amelia didn't cry much. She'd done enough of that already. Instead, she moved through her apartment like she was living in a place that no longer belonged to her. Every surface whispered his name. His jacket still hung on the back of her chair. His handwriting still stared at her from the spine of her sketchbook. To the one who makes silence sing. She'd left it there. A part of her couldn't bring herself to erase him yet, but the space he occupied was shrinking, not just physically, but emotionally. What once felt like a flood of him, inside her's voice, his scent, the heat of his body against hers, now trickled into cold fragments. The magic was gone, or worse, it had never been real. Her phone buzzed for the third time that morning. Julian, this time, she opened the message. I'm sorry, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to talk. Amelia stared at it. The pain hadn't dulled, but it had taken shape now. A wound she could point to, and maybe one day live with. She typed then, erased, typed again. Not yet, not never, but not now. Not when the ruins were still smoldering. Instead, she packed a bag and left town. Her sister lived in a coastal town 3 hours north, quiet, windswept, the kind of place where the sea did the talking and you were only expected to listen. Amelia arrived just after dusk. Her sister Camila opened the door in pajamas, holding a glass of wine. You're early, she said, and you look like hell. I left someone, Amelia replied. Was he worth leaving? Amelia stepped inside. I thought he was worth everything. Camila didn't ask more, just handed her the other half of the wine. The beach became her sanctuary. Cold sand, foamy tides, wind that hurt just enough to make her feel alive again. She drew in her sketchbook things she couldn't say out loud. A cracked teacup, a woman standing in a burning field, a pair of hands letting go of a thread. She stayed with Camila for 2 weeks. In that time, Julian sent 5 more messages. I miss you. I'm in therapy now. You were the best part of my life. I would never hurt you like that. I love you. The 5th one made her laugh, not out of joy, out of exhaustion. Love wasn't what you felt. It was what you did when it mattered most. On her last day at the beach, she received a letter, handwritten, no return address. She knew the writing. Julian, she almost didn't open it. She almost threw it in the fire Camila built each night. But her hands betrayed her, slow and shaking. opening the envelope like it might explode. Inside. 3 pages. No greeting. Just this. I used to think broken people couldn't love right. That we'd always be too sharp or too soft in the wrong places. You proved me wrong. You loved me with precision, with depth. You made room for me before I even knew how to stand still. I failed you. I know that. I was afraid of being seen. Not the polished version of me, the writer with good metaphors, but the scared, unfinished, cowardly version. The one who cheats, the one who lies, the one who carries guilt like a second skin, and I hated that I became him again. You didn't deserve that. I wanted to be your safe place, but I brought a storm instead. I don't know if you'll ever speak to me again. I don't know if you should, but if you do, I'll spend the rest of my days giving you the version of me you always believed was there. Amelia reread the letter 3 times. Then, very quietly, she cried. But not for him, for herself, for every part of her that had stayed, hoping he'd catch up to the love she offered freely, for the time she wasted shrinking so he'd feel big, for the silence she tolerated in the name of understanding. That night, she sat by the fire with Camila and didn't mention the letter. Some things, she realized, are better left as ashes. Back in the city, a week later, her apartment felt different, airier. She cleared the shelf where his books used to be. She erased his name from the sketchbook. She left the jacket in the building's donation bin. Her phone buzzed. One final time. Julian again. Are you home? She stared at the message. And for once, she didn't feel the ache. Amelia didn't reply to Julian's message. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, rereading it as if it might change. Are you home? The question echoed like a knock at a door she didn't know whether to answer. It wasn't just about location. It never was with him. He was asking if she was still reachable, if the version of her that had waited, forgiven, and bent was still there behind the silence. She left the phone on her nightstand and went to wash her face. The mirror didn't lie. She looked older. Not in years, but in weight. Grief aged people that way. Still, there was a clarity in her eyes now, like a woman who'd walked through fire, barefoot, and somehow made it to the other side. The city outside moved on without her, indifferent to heartbreak, horns, sirens, laughter from bars to streets over. The same world where she'd once fallen in love on a bookstore ladder. She didn't sleep that night. She dreamed. Though in the dream, Julian stood at her door, holding nothing, wearing the look he always wore when he was trying to be brave. She opened the door, not with hope but with the calm resignation of someone who knew they'd already left, even if their feet hadn't moved. And in the dream, she didn't let him in. The next day she ran into him by accident. Not fate. Not destiny. Just New York, with its cruel habit of placing people exactly where you don't want them. It was outside the old music hall. She was there to see a friend's rehearsal. He was there, just there, standing across the street like the past had walked back into frame. Their eyes met. He crossed over. Amelia, he said cautiously. Julian. He looked thinner, more tired, but not broken. His eyes still had that unreadable depth, the kind that made you want to lean in, even when you shouldn't. I didn't expect to see you, he said. I wasn't hiding. Your number still works, he offered. I know. There was an awkward pause. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I meant what I wrote, he said. I know, she said again. That doesn't make it easier. I'm not asking for easy. Then what are you asking for? He hesitated. A chance to show you who I am now, who I'm trying to be. I don't want to fall in love with someone's potential again, Julian. I did that already. I loved the idea of you more than the truth. His shoulders dropped. I'm not that man anymore. But you were, she said, and that matters. He nodded. It was the first time he didn't try to argue. She looked at him, really looked. The man she had once imagined a life with, a dog, a mortgage, matching coffee mugs. The man who had filled pages of her journals with promises and apologies. And yet, he was also the man who'd lied, the man who'd cheated, the man who hadn't fought for her until after she walked away. I'll always care about you, she said. He stepped closer. Then don't shut the door. She met his gaze. I'm not, but I'm locking it for now. If you ever really become that man, he'll have to knock properly. Julian swallowed. And if I do, then maybe I'll answer. She walked past him, then slow, measured. She didn't look back. He didn't follow. Later that night, Amelia sat in her kitchen, listening to rain slide down the window pane. She didn't feel sad. She felt intact. Maybe not whole, but intact. There was no romantic ending. No swelling music. Just a quiet kitchen, a glass of wine, and the peace of finally knowing she could survive without him. She pulled her sketchbook onto the table. This time, she didn't draw him. She drew herself. Strong, alone, standing in the middle of a storm. Not asking it to stop, only proving she could endure it. Spring came slowly that year. Like it was unsure if it was welcome. The city thawed, inch by inch, and Amelia with it. Grief, she'd learned, didn't have a schedule. It didn't ask permission before showing up in the taste of a familiar dish, in the chords of a song they used to dance to in the kitchen, or in the empty chair at her breakfast table. But she also learned that healing doesn't announce itself either. It just begins. One morning, she realized she hadn't thought of Julian in 3 days. Not in the ache behind the eyes way. Not even in anger. He'd become a quieter ghost. Still there. Just no longer haunting. She went back to her freelance work, children's books, sketching designs for local galleries. Camila invited her to exhibit her storm series at a small studio near the coast. The pieces she'd drawn during her time by the sea. Amelia hesitated, but said yes. The opening night was modest, but warm. Strangers lingered by her sketches longer than she expected. People whispered words like raw and powerful. And a woman cried quietly in front of the drawing titled, "Letting Go Isn't Surrender." Julian wasn't there, but someone else was. His name was Theo. He stood in front of her piece thread, head tilted, brow furrowed, like the image was asking him questions he couldn't quite answer. A tall man, wore glasses, carried a dog-eared poetry book under one arm like it was part of him. She walked over. "You look like you're arguing with it," she said. He smiled, not startled. "A little. It's beautiful, but also brutal." "That's fair. Did you draw it?" "I did." He studied her now. "It's vulnerable. I don't think I've ever seen a line feel that honest." She didn't know what to say. To that, compliments were easier when they didn't cut so close. He stuck out a hand. "Theo, Amelia." They talked for almost an hour about the pieces, about storytelling, about how neither of them could keep a houseplant alive for more than a month. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't try to impress her. And when he left, she found herself wishing he hadn't. Theo started appearing in her days more often. Not in romantic ways, at least. Not immediately. He sent her articles about art. He invited her to a reading he was doing at a downtown bookstore. She went. His poem was about a childhood dog and loss, and the way silence could sound like a broken promise. She cried afterward. They sat on the library steps and talked until the sky went purple. Still, she was cautious. Not out of fear, but out of self-respect. She had rebuilt too much to give away the foundation too quickly. Julian messaged her once more. "I hope you're well." That was it. No more declarations. No more apologies. She didn't reply. Not because she hated him, but because she didn't owe him anything else. Some endings were sacred in their silence. A month later, Theo asked if she wanted to go to the botanical garden with him. "Just friends," he said. "Unless it feels like more, then we'll deal with that." She laughed. "You always this honest." "I'm too old for guessing games." He wasn't much older than her, but his eyes had seen things. Maybe not the same storms, but storms. Nonetheless, at the garden, they walked among tulips and white orchids, past children in sun hats, and couples on benches. She reached for his hand halfway through. It felt like the smallest, bravest thing she'd done in years. He didn't squeeze, he just held it like he knew it mattered. That night, lying in bed, Amelia thought of Julian, not with anger, not even with regret, just as a chapter, important, beautiful in places, terrifying in others. A chapter that shaped her, but one she'd never returned to reread. Theo was not a replacement. He wasn't a sequel. He was a new story, one that hadn't yet been written, and for the first time in a long time, she wanted to see what happened next. The summer Amelia had once imagined spending with Julian passed without fanfare. No shared vacations. No spontaneous train rides. No handwritten notes tucked inside books left on pillows. Instead, she spent it in moments that were hers and hers alone. Barefoot in her kitchen while cooking something she'd never tried before. Sketching a mural for a school library. Dancing in the rain with Theo on a dare. Her heart still carried bruises. But bruises meant you survived the hit. She and Theo didn't rush. Their relationship unfolded like the turning of pages, slow, deliberate, unforced. He never asked her to prove her trust, and she never had to ask if he was telling the truth. He showed her, in quiet consistency, in patient listening, in the way he always said goodnight. Even when he was tired, there were no fireworks, just warmth. And it was enough. One day in August, a gallery reached out to her. A curator had seen her Storm series online. They wanted to feature her in a show about artists who used personal pain to shape their work. She almost said no. Then she remembered who she used to be, someone who doubted her voice, who folded herself into silence so someone else could take up space. That woman had given too much, but she had also given birth to the one standing here now. So Amelia said yes. At the exhibit she wore black, not for mourning, for power. The room was filled with strangers, again critics, collectors, other artists. Theo stood in the back, hands in his pockets, smiling every time someone complimented her. She caught a glimpse of one man, tall, slightly slouched, with familiar eyes. Julian. He wasn't on the guest list. But he didn't approach her. He stood at the edge of the room, gazing at her sketch titled The Echo, a self-portrait she had drawn with her back turned. Walking away, he smiled softly, and then he left. She never saw him again. 2 weeks later, Amelia and Theo took a trip to a small village near the mountains. No signal, no noise. Just them, a wood cabin, and the sharp, clean air of peace. On the third night, they sat by a lake with coffee and silence between them. He looked at her like he always did, not like he was searching for something, but like he was seeing what was already there. "Do you still think about him?" Theo asked. She sipped her drink. "Sometimes less as a person, more like a place I once lived. And does that bother you?" "No," she said. "I loved someone who broke me. I forgave him. But more importantly, forgave myself for staying as long as I did." He nodded. "You're incredible." She smiled. "I'm real. That's better." Back in the city, Amelia started a new series, not storms this time, not endings, but beginnings. She painted hands reaching toward light, children planting seeds, a woman dancing alone in her apartment, eyes closed, music up too loud. She called it The After. It sold out before opening night. One evening, as they lay in bed, Theo asked, "Do you believe in soulmates?" She thought about it, about the versions of herself that had tried to bend for love, and the one who had finally decided to stand up straight. "I believe in timing," she said. "In growth. In people who choose each other every day, even when it's hard. Maybe that's what a soulmate really is. Someone who shows up when you've finally shown up for yourself." Theo kissed the back of her hand. "Then I'm glad I found you now." "Me too," she whispered. And in that soft, undramatic moment, Amelia finally understood. Some love stories don't last forever, but some endings, they're the beginning of something better.